The kiss was tentative at first, exploratory, like we were both learning a new language. Then it deepened, years of unspoken longing pouring into it. He tasted like chili and possibility and everything I'd ever wanted. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Connor rested his forehead against mine. "I was hoping you'd do that," he whispered. "You just told me you've been in love with me for years," I said, my voice shaky. "What did you think I'd do?" He laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "I don't know. Tell me I'm crazy? That I'm confused? That I'm your straight best friend having some kind of quarter-life crisis? You're not straight, Connor." "No," he agreed softly, pulling back to look at me. His eyes were shining in the twilight. "I'm not. I don't know exactly what I am yet. Maybe bi, maybe pan, maybe just Connor who loves Alex. But I'm not straight, and I'm tired of pretending." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Do you have any idea how long I've waited to hear you say something like this?" His expression crumbled slightly. "I know about your feelings since the beginning," I admitted. "But you dated women, you talked about girls, you never gave me any sign that you might. I learned to live with loving you from a distance." "I'm so sorry," he breathed. "All that time we wasted." "Hey," I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. The simple touch sent electricity up my arm. "We're here now. That's what matters." The sky had darkened to deep purple, stars beginning to emerge like diamond pinpricks. The temperature had dropped significantly, and I could see goosebumps on Connor's arms. "We should get in the tent," I said. "It's getting cold." He nodded, but neither of us moved for a moment. Then he squeezed my hand and stood, pulling me up with him. Inside the tent, we arranged our sleeping bags, suddenly shy with each other, despite what had just happened. We'd shared tents before, but everything felt different now. Changed, charged with new meaning. "Alex?" Connor's voice was small in the darkness. "Yeah? Can we?" He trailed off, frustrated with himself. I understood what he couldn't articulate. I unzipped my sleeping bag and held it open by invitation. He quickly unzipped his own and joined me, and we zipped them together, creating one larger space. Connor settled beside me, and after a moment of hesitation, he rested his head on my chest. I wrapped my arms around him, and he let out a long, shuddering breath, as if releasing years of tension. "Is this okay?" he asked quietly. "More than okay," I assured him, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. His hair smelled like water and a shampoo, something woodsy and masculine. We lay there in silence for a while, listening to each other breathe, adjusting to this new reality. My mind was racing with questions and concerns about what this meant, about what would happen when we returned to real life, but I forced them away. Right now, in this moment, Connor was in my arms, and that was enough. "Thank you," he murmured, already half asleep, "for being patient with me, for waiting." "I'd have waited forever," I whispered back, and I meant it. As Connor's breathing evened out into sleep, I stared up at the tent ceiling, barely visible in the darkness. Outside, the mountains stood, silent and eternal, bearing witness to our transformation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new territory to navigate. But tonight, I fell asleep with my heart finally at peace, holding the man I loved in my arms. I woke to the sound of rain on the tent and the warmth of Connor's body pressed against mine. Sometime during the night, we'd shifted so that he was spooned against me, his back to my chest, my arm draped over his waist. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, afraid that any movement would break the spell and reveal this had all been a vivid dream. Then Connor stirred, turning in my arms to face me, his eyes slowly blinking open. "Hey," he whispered, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Hey yourself." We stared at each other in the dim morning light filtering through the tent, and I could see the moment reality hit him, the slight widening of his eyes, the catch in his breath. But instead of pulling away like I'd feared, he moved closer, closing the small distance between us. "I was worried I'd dreamed last night," he admitted. "Me too." He reached up tentatively, tracing the line of my jaw with his fingertips. The touch was feather-light, exploratory, like he was memorizing my features. "Can I kiss you again in the daylight, when I'm fully conscious and can actually appreciate it?" I answered by closing the distance between us. This kiss was different from last night, slower, deeper, more deliberate. His hands slid from my jaw to the back of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair. I let my hand drift down his back, feeling the muscles shift beneath his shirt. When we broke apart, both slightly breathless, the rain had intensified, drumming harder against the tent fabric. "We should check the weather," Connor said reluctantly, but he made no move to leave our cocoon. "Probably," I agreed, equally reluctant. Another minute passed before we actually managed to separate. The temperature had dropped overnight, and we dressed quickly, adding extra layers. When Connor unzipped the tent and looked outside, he let out a low whistle. "That doesn't look good." I peered over his shoulder. The previously clear sky had been replaced by heavy gray clouds that hung low over the mountains. The rain was steady, but not yet torrential, but the wind had picked up significantly, bending the smaller trees and sending ripples across the lake's surface. "Check your phone," I suggested. "See if you can get a weather report." Connor dug his phone out of his pack, frowning at the screen. No signal. "You?" I checked mine with the same result. Nothing, but we knew that might happen up here. We prepared a quick breakfast of instant oatmeal and coffee, eating inside the tent as the storm intensified outside. What had started as steady rain was becoming something more serious, with occasional cracks of thunder rolling across the mountains. "What do you think?" Connor asked, studying our map. "We're supposed to hike another 6 miles to the next campsite today, but in this weather..." I considered our options. The smart thing would be to stay put. This tent is solid, we have plenty of supplies, and it's safer than trying to navigate slippery trails and low visibility. He nodded, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "I just hope this isn't the start of something bigger. September storms in the mountains can be unpredictable." "Hey," I took his hand, lacing our fingers together. The simple touch sent electricity up my arm. "We're here now. That's what matters." The sky had darkened to deep purple, stars beginning to emerge like diamond pinpricks. The temperature had dropped significantly, and I could see goosebumps on Connor's arms. "We should get in the tent," I said. "It's getting cold." He nodded, but neither of us moved for a moment. Then he squeezed my hand and stood, pulling me up with him. Inside the tent, we arranged our sleeping bags, suddenly shy with each other, despite what had just happened. We'd shared tents before, but everything felt different now. Changed, charged with new meaning. "Alex?" Connor's voice was small in the darkness. "Yeah? Can we?" He trailed off, frustrated with himself. I understood what he couldn't articulate. I unzipped my sleeping bag and held it open by invitation. He quickly unzipped his own and joined me, and we zipped them together, creating one larger space. Connor settled beside me, and after a moment of hesitation, he rested his head on my chest. I wrapped my arms around him, and he let out a long, shuddering breath, as if releasing years of tension. "Is this okay?" he asked quietly. "More than okay," I assured him, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. His hair smelled like water, and his shampoo, something woodsy and masculine. We lay there in silence for a while, listening to each other breathe, adjusting to this new reality. My mind was racing with questions and concerns about what this meant, about what would happen when we returned to real life, but I forced them away. Right now, in this moment, Connor was in my arms, and that was enough. "Thank you," he murmured, already half asleep, "for being patient with me, for waiting." "I'd have waited forever," I whispered back, and I meant it. As Connor's breathing evened out into sleep, I stared up at the tent ceiling, barely visible in the darkness. Outside, the mountains stood, silent and eternal, bearing witness to our transformation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new territory to navigate. But tonight, I fell asleep with my heart finally at peace, holding the man I loved in my arms. I woke to the sound of rain on the tent and the warmth of Connor's body pressed against mine. Sometime during the night, we'd shifted so that he was spooned against me, his back to my chest, my arm draped over his waist. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, afraid that any movement would break the spell and reveal this had all been a vivid dream. Then Connor stirred, turning in my arms to face me, his eyes slowly blinking open. "Hey," he whispered, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Hey yourself." We stared at each other in the dim morning light filtering through the tent, and I could see the moment reality hit him, the slight widening of his eyes, the catch in his breath. But instead of pulling away like I'd feared, he moved closer, closing the small distance between us. "I was worried I'd dreamed last night," he admitted. "Me too." He reached up tentatively, tracing the line of my jaw with his fingertips. The touch was feather-light, exploratory, like he was memorizing my features. "Can I kiss you again in the daylight, when I'm fully conscious and can actually appreciate it?"
Have you ever had that one friend? The one who made your heart race every time he smiled? The one whose laughter could light up your darkest days? That was Connor for me. And this is the story of how a simple mountain camping trip changed everything between us. My name is Jackson, and I'm 26 years old. I'd been out and proud since college, but I'd learned the hard way to guard my heart around straight guys, especially around Connor Mitchell. 6 feet of athletic perfection with sandy brown hair that always looked perfectly messy, green eyes that crinkled when he laughed, and a smile that could make me forget my own name. We'd been friends since our sophomore year of college, bonding over late-night study sessions and a shared love of the outdoors. 4 years later, we were still close. Despite my secret feelings that I'd buried so deep, I sometimes convinced myself they didn't exist. "Dude, are you ready for this?" Connor's voice pulled me from my thoughts as we stood at the base of Mount Rainier's Wonderland Trail. He adjusted his backpack straps, his fitted outdoor shirt revealing shoulders I tried not to stare at. "Born ready," I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. 3 days. 3 days alone with Connor in the wilderness. I could survive this. I'd survived worse. The September air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and approaching autumn. Other hikers milled around the trailhead, checking gear and taking photos. A couple nearby caught my attention. 2 men, probably in their 30s, holding hands as they studied a trail map. One of them caught me looking and smiled knowingly. I felt a pang of longing so sharp it almost took my breath away. "Earth to Alex!" Connor waved his hand in front of my face. "Where'd you go, man?" "Sorry, just excited." I wasn't lying. Spending time with Connor always made me feel alive, even if it hurt sometimes. We started our ascent as the morning sun climbed higher, painting the trail in golden light. Connor set a steady pace, occasionally turning back to flash me that devastating grin. "Keeping up, okay?" "I literally run marathons, Connor. I think I can handle a hike." He laughed, the sound echoing through the evergreens. "Just checking on my best friend." Best friend, right. That's all I'd ever be. The trail wound through old-growth forest, massive Douglas firs creating a cathedral-like canopy above us. Shafts of sunlight broke through in places, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. The steady rhythm of our footsteps became meditative, and I found myself relaxing into the familiar comforts of Connor's presence. "So, how are things with Jessica?" I asked immediately, regretting it. His girlfriend of 6 months was a sweet woman who worked in marketing. She was perfect for him in all the ways I could never be. Connor's expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his features. "We actually broke up last week." I stopped walking. "What? Connor, why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "It's been weird. I needed to process it, I guess." She said He paused, adjusting his backpack unnecessarily. "She said I wasn't emotionally available, that I was holding something back." My chest tightened with conflicting emotions, sympathy for his pain and something shameful and hopeful that I refused to name. "I'm sorry, man. That sucks." "Yeah, well," he resumed walking, his jaw tight. "Maybe she was right. Maybe there is something I've been holding back." The cryptic statement hung in the air between us. But before I could respond, the trail opened up to a stunning vista. The mountain rose before us, its peak crowned with snow despite the late summer season. Alpine meadows spread out below, still dotted with late-blooming wildflowers and purples and yellows. "Damn," Connor breathed, and we stood there in silence, absorbing the beauty. We hiked for another 4 hours, falling into easy conversation about work, mutual friends, his mother's upcoming retirement, normal things, safe things. But there was an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify, a tension that made the air feel charged like before a thunderstorm. By the time we reached our planned campsite, a designated spot near a crystal-clear alpine lake, my legs were burning and my shirt clung to my back with sweat. Connor looked unfairly attractive, his face flushed from exertion, a few strands of hair sticking to his forehead. "I'm claiming the first swim," he announced, dropping his pack near a flat area suitable for our tent. "No arguments here. I need to set up camp anyway." Connor stripped off his shirt in one fluid motion, revealing a torso that belonged in a fitness magazine. I'd seen him shirtless countless times, at the gym, at the beach, in locker rooms, but it never got easier. I busied myself with unpacking our tent, trying not to watch him as he walked toward the lake in just his hiking shorts. The tent took longer than necessary to set up because I kept getting distracted by the sounds of Connor splashing in the water, his occasional whoops of joy at the cold mountain water. By the time I finished, he was emerging from the lake, water streaming down his chest and abs, his shorts clinging to his thighs. "Your turn," he said, grinning. "It's freezing, but it feels amazing." I grabbed my towel and headed to the water's edge, grateful for the excuse to cool down in more ways than one. The lake was indeed freezing, fed by snowmelt from higher elevations. I gasped as I dove in, the cold shocking my system and clearing my head. When I surfaced, Connor was watching me from the shore, and there was something in his expression I'd never seen before, something intense and searching. But then he blinked and it was gone, replaced with his usual easy smile. "Dinner," he called out. We cooked over our portable camp stove as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Connor had insisted on bringing ingredients for his famous camping chili, and the smell soon filled our campsite, making my stomach growl. "You know," he said as we ate, sitting on a log we dragged near our tent, "I've been thinking a lot lately about life, about what I want, about who I really am." I looked at him, but he was staring into his bowl, his brow furrowed. "That sounds heavy." "Yeah," he let out a long breath. "Jessica wasn't wrong. I have been holding back, from her, from everyone, maybe even from myself." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" He set down his bowl and finally looked at me. In the fading light, his green eyes looked darker, more serious than I'd ever seen them. I think I asked you on this trip because I needed to figure some things out away from everything else, with someone I trust completely." "Connor, let me finish," he interrupted gently, "because if I don't say this now, I might never say it." He took a deep breath. "Alex, do you remember freshman year? That night we stayed up until dawn talking about everything and nothing?" I nodded, confused about where this was going. "I remember thinking that I'd never connected with anyone the way I connected with you, and I told myself it was just friendship, just finding my people in a new place. But over the years, that feeling never went away. It got stronger." My mouth went dry. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. "And then you came out junior year," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I remember being so scared. Not of you being gay. I need you to understand that. I was scared because suddenly I had to confront these feelings I'd been pushing down. I told myself I was straight, dated women, and tried to fit into this box I'd built for myself." "Connor, what are you saying?" My voice cracked. He turned to face me fully, and I could see his hands trembling slightly. "I'm saying that Jessica was right. I wasn't emotionally available to her because my heart—" He paused, swallowing hard. "My heart has been yours for years, Alex. I've just been too scared and confused to admit it." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The sounds of the wilderness around us, birds settling for the night, the gentle lap of lake water, the whisper of wind through pines, all faded to white noise.
Don't have to say anything, Connor rushed on, misinterpreting my silence for rejection. I know this is coming out of nowhere. I know you probably don't feel the same way, but I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed you to know. I kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't thought through. One moment I was drowning in confusion and hope, and the next my hands were cupping his face and my lips were on his. For a heartbeat he froze, and I started to pull away, horrified that I'd misunderstood everything. Then he kissed me back. His hands came up to grip my shoulders, then slid into my hair, pulling me closer.
Tent with you for a day isn't exactly a hardship. We spent the morning in comfortable companionship, playing cards, talking, and occasionally kissing, though that last activity tended to derail the first two. Each kiss still felt new and exciting, filled with the wonder of finally being able to express what we'd both been feeling. "Can I ask you something?" Connor said during a lull in conversation. We were lying side by side in our joined sleeping bags, my arm around him, his head on my shoulder. "Anything? When did you know about me? I mean, that you had feelings for me?" I thought back to those early days of our friendship. Do you remember that night during sophomore year when we went to that terrible house party and ended up leaving early? He nodded against my shoulder. We walked around campus for hours just talking. You told me about your dad, about the pressure you felt to be perfect, to live up to these expectations, and you were so vulnerable, so real. I remember looking at you under the streetlights and thinking, I could love this person. And then I immediately panicked and tried to bury the feeling. "I remember that night," Connor said softly. "That was the night I started thinking of you differently too. Like you weren't just a friend, but someone essential. Why didn't you ever say anything? I mean, before this weekend?" He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing absent patterns on my chest. "Fear, mostly. I'd grown up in a pretty traditional family. Not homophobic exactly, but definitely operating under the assumption that I'd grow up, marry a woman, have kids, the whole prescribed path. The idea that I might be attracted to men, that I might be in love with my best friend, it terrified me. And now? Now I'm more terrified of losing you than I am of what anyone else might think." He propped himself up on one elbow to look at me. "These past few months, after Jessica and I broke up, I couldn't stop thinking about you, about us, about what it would be like to stop hiding from myself. I realized that I've been living half a life, always holding back, always pretending to be something I'm not." I cupped his face with my hand, my thumb brushing across his cheekbone. "You never have to pretend with me. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're figuring out about yourself, I'm here for all of it." His eyes grew bright with emotion. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," I corrected. "Against all odds, two idiots who've been in love with each other for years finally figured it out." He laughed, but it turned into a gasp as a particularly loud crack of thunder shook the tent. The wind had become more aggressive, making the tent walls bow inward with each gust. "This is getting worse," Connor observed, sitting up. "Maybe we should—" His words were cut off by a tremendous crashing sound from somewhere nearby. We both froze, looking at each other with wide eyes. "That sounded close," I said, already moving to put on my rain jacket. "Alex, wait. I'm just going to look outside. Stay here." I unzipped the tent door and stepped out into the storm. The rain was coming down in sheets now, immediately soaking through my pants despite the jacket. The wind whipped at my face, and I had to squint to see through the deluge. My heart sank as I spotted the source of the crash, a large pine tree, its roots undermined by the saturated ground and relentless wind, had fallen about 30 feet from our tent. It had narrowly missed our campsite, but it now blocked the main trail back the way we'd come. Connor appeared at my shoulder, similarly drenched within seconds. "Shit," he breathed, taking in the fallen tree. "We can't go back that way, and we can't safely go forward in this weather," I added, raising my voice to be heard over the wind. "We need to reassess." Back inside the tent, we stripped off our wet outer layers and consulted our map with a flashlight, the storm having darkened the day to twilight levels. "Okay," Connor said, his finger tracing our options. We're here. The main trail is blocked behind us. There's an emergency shelter marked on the map about 2 miles north. It's off the main trail, but if we can reach it, we'd have better protection than the tent. I study the route. It involves crossing that ridge we saw yesterday. In this weather, that could be dangerous. But if this storm gets worse, staying in the tent could be equally dangerous. What if another tree comes down, but closer this time? He had a point. I looked at our supplies, mentally calculating. We'd need to pack light, take only essentials. We could come back for the rest once the storm passes. For the next hour, we worked in tense cooperation, packing a single backpack with critical supplies, water purification tablets, emergency aid kit, high-calorie foods, flashlights, and our phones. Useless for calls, but valuable for their GPS functions and flashlights. We put on every waterproof layer we had, double-checked our bearings, and prepared to face the storm. "Ready?" Connor asked, his hand on the tent zipper. I nodded, trying to project more confidence than I felt. Together, the moment we stepped outside, the storm hit us with full force. The wind was strong enough that we had to lean into it, and the rain stung our faces like tiny needles. We decided that Connor would lead, since he had more experience with backcountry navigation, and I'd follow close behind. The terrain that had seemed so beautiful and benign the day before now felt hostile and treacherous. Every step required concentration, as the trail had become a muddy stream. Visibility was terrible, limiting our sight to just a few yards ahead. We'd been hiking for about 45 minutes when Connor suddenly stopped, holding up his hand. I moved up beside him to see what had caused the halt. The creek we needed to cross, which had been a modest stream the day before, had swollen to a raging torrent. Brown water rushed past, carrying branches and debris. The wooden footbridge that should have been there was gone, likely washed away by the flood. "We can't cross that," I shouted over the roar of water and wind. Connor nodded grimly, scanning up and down the creek bank. "There," he pointed, upstream. "Those rocks, we might be able to use them as stepping stones." It was risky, but we didn't have many options. The alternative was turning back, and I wasn't sure we could safely make it back to our tent in these conditions. Connor went first, testing each rock before committing his weight. I watched, my heart in my throat, as he made it about halfway across. Then, on the fourth stone, his foot slipped. "Connor!" I screamed as he went down, hitting the water with a splash. Time seemed to slow. I watched him go under, then surface, gasping, his arms flailing as he tried to fight the current. Without thinking, I kicked off my backpack and dived in after him. The cold was shocking, stealing my breath. The current was stronger than I had anticipated, pulling me downstream. I fought against it, swimming hard towards where I'd seen Connor go under again. My hand hit something solid, his jacket, and I grabbed hold, pulling with everything I had. We both surfaced, coughing and gasping. "I've got you," I managed to choke out. "Don't let go." Connor's eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded. Together, we fought the current, aiming for the opposite bank. Each stroke felt like swimming through concrete, my muscles burning with the effort. But slowly, painfully, we made progress. My hand hit rock, then mud. With the last of my strength, I hauled us both onto the bank, where we collapsed, coughing up water and shaking violently from cold and adrenaline. "Are you okay?" I gasped out, running my hands over Connor, checking for injuries. I think so," he stuttered through chattering teeth. "Lost my boot." Sure enough, his left foot was clad only in a wet sock. We'd also lost our backpack with most of our supplies. All we had were the clothes on our backs and the determination to survive. "The shelter," Connor managed. "How far?" I tried to orient myself, but between the storm and our unexpected swim, I'd lost my bearings. I pulled out my phone, which miraculously was waterproof and still functional. The GPS showed our location and the shelter, less than a mile. "We can make it." Connor nodded, his jaw set with determination despite his shaking. I helped him up, and we started moving again. I gave him my boot from the backpack we'd lost, and we managed to fashion a makeshift covering for his foot using my emergency rain poncho. That final mile was the longest of my life. Every step was agony. Cold, exhaustion, fear, all taking their toll.
but we pushed forward, supporting each other, refusing to give up. When the shelter finally came into view through the rain, a small wooden structure built into the mountainside, I almost cried with relief. We stumbled the final yards and practically fell through the door. The shelter was basic but dry, with a concrete floor, wooden walls, and a roof that didn't leak. After the hellish conditions outside, it felt like paradise. "We need to get out of these clothes," I said through my chattering teeth. "Hypothermia is a real risk." We stripped down to our underwear with shaking hands, hanging our wet clothes on nails protruding from the walls. There was a fireplace with a small stack of wood left by previous visitors, a lifesaver. With numb fingers, I managed to get a fire started using waterproof matches from the pocket of my jacket. As the flames caught and grew, we huddled together in front of it, sharing our body heat. Connor was still shaking violently, his lips tinged with blue. "Come here," I said, pulling him closer. We lay down on the hard floor, the emergency blanket from my jacket pocket spread beneath us, pressed together, with the fire at our backs. Gradually, painfully, warmth returned to our bodies. The shaking subsided, color came back to Connor's face, and as our immediate survival became less uncertain, the reality of what had almost happened hit me. "You could have died," I said, my voice breaking. "When you went under, I thought—" "But I didn't," Connor interrupted, turning to face me, "because you came after me. You saved my—"
Feeling and connection. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside our small shelter, we had everything we needed. As night fell and we lay wrapped in each other's arms by the firelight, listening to the storm slowly exhaust itself, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We'd survived. We were together, and whatever challenges tomorrow brought, we'd face them side by side. I woke to silence. After hours of thunder, wind, and pounding rain, the absence of sound was almost eerie. Gray dawn light filtered through the shelter's single window, and I could see clear sky through the gaps in the door. Connor was still asleep, his face peaceful, one arm draped across my chest. I took a moment to just watch him, this man I loved, this unexpected gift the universe had given me. His hair was still damp, sticking up at odd angles. There was a small cut on his forehead from our ordeal yesterday that I'd cleaned and bandaged with supplies from the shelter's emergency kit. He looked vulnerable and beautiful, and mine. As if sensing my gaze, his eyes fluttered open. A slow smile spread across his face when he saw me watching him. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning. How do you feel?" He took inventory, stretching carefully. "Sore, bruised, but alive, thanks to you." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking serious. "I mean it, Alex. You risked your life for me yesterday. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat," I said simply. "You're worth it. You've always been worth it." His eyes glistened with emotion. "I don't deserve you." "Hey, none of that." I cupped his face, making him look at me. "We deserve each other, and we deserve to be happy together." He kissed me then, soft and sweet, a promise of morning kisses to come for, hopefully, many years. When we pulled apart, the sun had fully risen, streaming through the window and painting everything gold. We got up and assessed our situation in the daylight. Our clothes had dried somewhat overnight by the fire, and we dressed carefully, both of us stiff and sore. The shelter's emergency supplies included some energy bars and water purification tablets, which we used to prepare a meager breakfast. "We need to get back to our tent, get our gear, and then head down," I said, studying the map we'd found in the shelter. "The trail we took up should be clear enough now that the storm has passed." Connor nodded, testing his injured foot. "This is going to slow us down, but I can manage." The world outside the shelter looked washed clean. The storm had stripped some leaves from the trees, and small branches littered the ground, but the air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and pine. The sun felt like a blessing on my face. We made our way back toward our campsite, the journey taking twice as long as it should have with Connor's injury and our overall exhaustion. But we took our time supporting each other,
stopping frequently to rest. When we finally reached our campsite around midday, we found our tent remarkably intact, though everything inside was damp. We packed up methodically, dividing the load so Connor wouldn't have to carry too much weight on his injured foot. "Ready to head back to civilization?" I asked, as we shouldered our packs. Connor looked around at the mountain landscape, the lake still rippling from yesterday's wind, the meadow flowers bent but not broken, the eternal peak rising above it all. "Part of me wants to stay up here forever, in this bubble where it's just you and me." I understood what he meant. Up here, we didn't have to think about what this meant for our lives back home, about the questions we'd face, about how our relationship would change our friendships and family dynamics. "I know," I said, taking his hand, "but we can't hide up here forever, and honestly, I don't want to hide. Not anymore." He squeezed my hand, nodding. "You're right. I'm just nervous." "Me too," I admitted, "but we'll figure it out together, one step at a time." The descent was slow but uneventful. We took frequent breaks, during which we talked about everything: his concerns about coming out to his family, my worries about how this would change our friend group, our hopes and fears about starting a relationship after years of friendship. "My parents are going to be shocked," Connor said, during one rest stop, staring out at the view. "They've been asking about Jessica, probably hoping we'd get back together. How do you think they'll react, really?" He considered this. "I don't think they'll disown me or anything like that, but there will be an adjustment period. My dad especially. He had this vision of my life, you know? Take over the family business, marry a nice girl, give him grandkids. This doesn't fit that picture." "For what it's worth, you can still give him grandkids if you want them," I pointed out gently. "Being with a man doesn't change that." Connor's face lit up. "Do you want kids?" "Someday, maybe." "But Connor, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. We've been together for all of 2 days. Let's figure out the basics first." He laughed, and I loved the sound. "You're right. I'm just excited. Terrified, but excited. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm being honest about who I am." We continued down the mountain, and with each mile I could feel us both transitioning back to the real world. Cell phone signals returned first, a beep signaling voicemails and text messages waiting. Then we started seeing other hikers on the trail, day trippers enjoying the post-storm sunshine. "Rough night up there?" one hiker asked as we passed, eyeing our somewhat bedraggled appearance. "You could say that," Connor replied with a grin, "but we made it through." As the trailhead came into view, I felt a mix of relief and melancholy. Our mountain adventure was over, but our real journey was just beginning. Connor must have felt the same because he stopped just before we reached the parking lot, pulling me aside. "Before we get back to real life, I need to say something." I waited, watching emotions play across his face. "These past few days have been the most terrifying and the most beautiful of my life," he said. "I almost died yesterday, and the only thing I could think while I was in that water was that I couldn't die before telling you how I felt, before really living as my authentic self." He took both my hands in his. "I don't want to go back to hiding. I don't want to pretend we're just friends. I want to hold your hand in public. I want to introduce you as my boyfriend. I want everyone to know that I love you." My throat tightened with emotion. "Are you sure, Connor? There's no rush. We can take this at whatever pace you need." "I'm sure," he interrupted firmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm completely sure about something. About you. About us. About who I am." He smiled, that devastating smile that had been breaking my heart for years. "Besides, I've wasted enough time being scared. I almost lost you yesterday, and I'm not wasting another minute." I pulled him into a kiss, not caring that we were visible from the parking lot, not caring who might see. When we broke apart, both of us were grinning like idiots. "Boyfriend?" I teased. "That's very high school for you." "Okay, fine. Partner, significant other, the love of my life?" "All of the above," I said, kissing him again quickly. "But boyfriend works for now." We walked the final yards to Connor's truck hand in hand. As we loaded our gear, I noticed a couple, 2 women, watching us from their car with warm smiles. One of them gave us a thumbs up, Connor noticed too and waved back, his cheeks flushing but his smile unwavering. The drive back to Seattle took 4 hours, and we spent most of it talking, planning, and occasionally reaching across the console to hold hands. We decided to tell our close friends first, then our families. Connor wanted to come out to his parents in person, and I offered to be there with him when he did. "What about work?" Connor asked as we merged onto the interstate. "We work for the same company even if we're in different departments. HR should know."
Avoid any conflicts of interest, I said, but I don't think it'll be an issue. We're not in each other's reporting chains. God, there's so much to think about, he said, laughing slightly. But also, does it feel so good? Like I'm finally living in full color instead of grayscale. I understood exactly what he meant. We stopped for dinner at a diner off the highway, sliding into a booth and sitting on the same side without thinking about it. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, smiled at us knowingly as she took our order. "You two look happy," she observed. "We are," Connor said, and the confidence in his voice made my heart soar. After she left, Connor leaned his head on my shoulder. "I keep thinking someone's going to tell me this isn't real, that I'm going to wake up and still be pretending to be someone I'm not." I kissed the top of his head. "It's real. I'm real. This is real." We ate slowly, neither of us eager to end this day that had changed everything, but eventually we had to leave, had to drive the final hour back to the city. Connor's apartment was closer, so we stopped there first. As I helped him carry his gear inside, he caught my hand. "Stay?" he asked. "I mean, if you want to, no pressure. I don't want tonight to end yet." "I'd love to stay." We showered separately, both of us still shy about certain boundaries, and then collapsed on his couch with leftover pizza he found in his fridge. We put on a movie, but barely watched it, too busy talking, kissing, and simply being together. "I should call my parents tomorrow," Connor said, during a quiet moment, anxiety creeping into his voice. "Get it over with." "Do you want me there?" He nodded. "If that's okay, I think I need you there." "Then I'll be there." We eventually moved to his bed, and he fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from our ordeal. I lay awake longer, watching him sleep, still hardly believing this was real. This man I'd loved for so long loved me back. We'd survived a storm, both literal and metaphorical, and come out stronger. The next morning, I woke to Connor making breakfast, humming to himself in the kitchen. He looked up as I entered, his face breaking into a grin. "Morning, boyfriend," he said, testing out the word. "Morning yourself," I replied, wrapping my arms around him from behind. We spent the morning in domestic bliss, making breakfast together, doing laundry, watching Connor properly clean and bandage his foot. It was mundane and perfect. Around noon, Connor took a deep breath. "Okay, I'm gonna call my parents and see if I can come over this afternoon." I squeezed his hand supportively as he made the call. His mother answered, delighted to hear from him, and they made plans for us to visit at 2 o'clock. The drive to his parents' house in Bellevue was tense. Connor gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. "Hey," I said gently, "whatever happens, I'm here. We're in this together." He nodded, some tension leaving his shoulders. Together. His parents' house was a beautiful craftsman in a tree-lined neighborhood. His mother, Karen, answered the door with a warm hug for Connor and a friendly one for me. She'd met me several times over the years at various events. "Alex, how wonderful to see you. Connor said you two just got back from a camping trip." "Yes, ma'am. Mount Rainier." Come in, come in. Your father's in the living room, Connor." Connor's father, Robert, was a tall man with gray hair and Connor's green eyes. He shook my hand firmly, and we all settled in the living room. Karen brought out coffee and cookies, chatting about neighborhood news and asking about our trip. I could see Connor gathering his courage, his leg bouncing nervously. I placed my hand on his knee, a silent offer of support. He looked at me, and I nodded. "Mom? Dad?" Connor started, his voice slightly shaky. "I need to tell you something important." The room went quiet. Karen sat down her coffee cup, concerned about crossing her features. "What is it, honey?" Connor reached over and took my hand, lacing our fingers together.
The gesture was clear, but he said the words anyway. I'm not straight. I think the term that fits best is bisexual, and Jackson and I are together. He's my boyfriend. The silence stretched. I watched his parents' faces carefully, ready to defend Connor if needed, but mostly just hoping for acceptance. Robert cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. My heart pounded. Then Karen spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, Connor, honey, is this why you've seemed so stressed these past few months? Why things with Jessica not work out?" Connor nodded. "I was trying to be something I'm not. I was hiding from myself, but I can't do that anymore. I won't." "And you love him?" Robert asked, nodding toward me. His tone was neutral, impossible to read. "Yes," Connor said firmly, squeezing my hand. "I love him. I have for years." Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, and I tensed, unsure what was coming. He walked over to Connor and pulled him into a hug. "Then I'm happy for you, son," he said gruffly. "All I've ever wanted is for you to be happy and true to yourself. If Jackson makes you happy, if being with him is being true to yourself, then that's all that matters." Connor let out a sob, hugging his father tightly. Karen was crying too, joining the embrace. "We love you so much. Thank you for trusting us with this. Thank you for being brave enough to be yourself." I felt tears streaming down my own face. This man who'd been so scared, so convinced his parents wouldn't understand, was being embraced, literally and figuratively, for who he truly was. Karen pulled me into the group hug next. "And Jackson, welcome to the family, properly this time." The rest of the visit was spent talking, answering questions, and sharing the story of our mountain adventure, though we downplayed the life-threatening parts to spare Karen's heart. Robert asked thoughtful questions about how long I'd known, how Connor had figured things out. Karen wanted to know about our plans, whether we were moving in together. Too soon, we assured her, and whether they'd still see Connor regularly. Absolutely. As we were leaving, Robert pulled me aside. "Take care of him," he said quietly. "He's sensitive, even if he doesn't always show it, and he's been through a lot figuring all this out." "I will," I promised. "He's the most important person in my world." Robert studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I can see that. I can see how you look at him. That's all a parent can hope for, that their child finds someone who looks at them like that." In the car on the way back to Connor's apartment, he was quiet, processing. "That went better than you expected," I ventured. "Yeah," he said, his voice wondering. "I kept imagining worst-case scenarios, but they were great. My dad hugged me, Alex. When's the last time my dad hugged me like that? They love you. That's what love does. It adapts, it grows, it accepts." Over the next few weeks, we settled into our new reality. We told our friends, who were universally supportive. Several admitted they'd been hoping we'd figure it out for years. Connor came out at work, and while there were some awkward moments, our colleagues were generally accepting. We took things slow in some ways. Connor moved in with me after 3 months, not right away. We learned each other as boyfriends, not just friends. We had our first fight about dishes, of all things, and learned how to navigate conflict. We celebrated our first anniversary of the mountain trip that changed everything. But in the ways that mattered most, we didn't take things slow at all. We loved fully, openly, without reservation. We built a life together, one filled with more camping trips, though we avoided storms, game nights with friends, dinners with both sets of parents, and quiet evenings at home. 2 years after that fateful mountain trip, I proposed to Connor at the same campsite where we'd first confessed our feelings. The ring was simple, inscribed with coordinates, the exact location of the shelter where we'd survived the storm together. He said yes before I'd even finished asking. "You know," Connor said that night, as we lay under the stars, engaged and impossibly happy, "I used to think of myself as incomplete, like I was living half a life, showing half of myself. I thought coming out, being with you, would mean losing something, my family's acceptance."
Approval, my image, my comfortable life. And now, I asked, pulling him closer, now I know I was wrong. I didn't lose anything. I gained everything.
I gained myself. I gained you. I gained the ability to live honestly and love openly. He kissed me softly. You saved my life in that creek, Alex. But really, you saved my life the moment you let me love you. We saved each other, I corrected. That's what love does. As we fell asleep under the same stars that had witnessed our transformation, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The years of unspoken longing, the fear and confusion, the literal storm we'd survived, and all the smaller storms we'd weathered since. Coming out, building a relationship, facing the world together. It hasn't always been easy, but it was worth it. He had been worth it. We had been worth it. And as Connor's breathing evened out into sleep and I held him close, I knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of our story. There would be more mountains to climb, more storms to weather, more adventures to share, but we'd face them all together, hand in hand, two halves of one whole finally united, and that made any challenge worth it. The community center was packed with people, friends, family, colleagues, and several members of the local LGBTQ+ community. Connor stood at the front of the room, his hand in mine, addressing the crowd. 5 years ago, I was living a lie, he said, his voice strong and clear. I was so afraid of being my authentic self that I was making myself and everyone around me miserable. Then I went on a camping trip with my best friend, and everything changed. He looked at me, and the love in his eyes still made my heart skip a beat. Today, my husband and I are opening the Connor and Jackson Mitchell Foundation, dedicated to providing support, resources, and safe spaces for LGBTQ+ youth who are struggling with their identity. We're starting a wilderness therapy program because sometimes it takes getting away from everything, literally climbing a mountain, to find yourself. The crowd applauded, and I squeezed his hand. I wish I could go back and tell my younger self that it gets better, Connor continued, that living honestly is worth any temporary discomfort, that the people who truly love you will accept you, that there's someone out there who will love you not despite who you are, but because of who you are. He turned to me fully. Alex, you taught me that love isn't about hiding or pretending. It's about being seen, really seen, and loved for exactly who you are. You gave me the courage to be myself, and for that, I'll be grateful every day for the rest of my life. Later, as the event wound down and people mingled with drinks and appetizers, Connor's mother approached us, tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of you boys, she said, hugging us both. What you're doing here, the lives you're going to change, it's beautiful. We had good role models, Connor said, kissing her cheek. Parents who taught us that love is love and that family means accepting people for who they are. As we drove home that night, I thought about how far we'd come, from that mountain campsite where Connor first told me he loved me, to the storm that nearly killed us, to this moment, married, happy, and working to make the world better for others like us. Hey, Connor said, breaking into my thoughts, what are you thinking about? Just everything. How lucky we are. How one camping trip changed our entire lives. He smiled, reaching over to take my hand. Best decision I ever made, asking you on that trip. Best decision I ever made, saying yes. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found the courage to tell you how I felt? Connor asked quietly. I squeezed his hand. Sometimes, but then I remember what you said at the foundation launch, that living honestly is always worth it. We would have found our way to each other eventually. We were meant for this. Connor brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles. Meant for each other. Meant for each other, I agreed. As we pulled into our driveway, the house we'd bought together last year, with a spare room that we were slowly turning into the nursery for the adoption process we just started, I felt overwhelmingly grateful for Connor's courage, for the storm that tested us, for every moment that had led us to this point.
Our story had started with a mountain adventure and a confession made under the stars, but the real adventure had been everything that came after, building a life together, facing challenges, celebrating victories, and loving each other through it all. And the best part? Our adventure was far from over.